think we've only got a minute to go. And we will start with the Feds, I think.
Correct.
96.
Page 96, sorry.
Page 96. I always feel like I'm reading a little bit from a hymn book when I do this. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you very much for your patience and your great listening this morning. Really appreciate it. We are now resuming for the after lunch session, and Ms. Clark, if you can introduce our next submitter, please.
Yep, so up next is submitter 3200 Federated Farmers on page 96.
And is that Mr. Hazelton?
Yes, I believe.
Mr. Hazelton, we can see, you're off mute, well done. That always makes a big difference in submissions, thank you. Okay, so look, the next little while is yours. If you can, we've read your submission, we've understood the points you're making. If you can just give us the highlights of it, that would be really helpful.
Yep, and I'll let Bruce start. So Bruce is also on here, so he can take it away.
Is he presenting?
With Federated Farmers. So
as part of the Federated Farmers one. Okay, fine.
Oh, is Bruce? I think I saw him on here, but now is he lost?
Yeah, he's gone.
Oh, no.
Like he's just dropped out. He's coming back on now.
Cool. Thank you.
Madam Chair, who is Roger D?
I'm not sure. I believe that we've let somebody in from the waiting room. So if that's the case, Matt, can you just pop them back in the waiting room?
Someone has done that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool, Bruce. You can take it away if you're ready. Yeah, still on.
Okay, I got it.
As I said before, Mr. Cameron, we have read the submission in great detail, so please don't read it again. Just give us the salient points.
Okay, I will do an introduction. As myself, I'm Bruce Cameron. I farm at Glen Murray. I'm also chairman of Franklin Sub-Province of Federated Farmers, which covers South Auckland and the North Waikato. I will be handing it over to Sean in a minute, but just to let you know that Sean has put a lot of work into this submission, and as I think you'll see with the work he has done to show other councils around New Zealand where they're at, and to give you a bit of background on other councils' submissions. And also we represent a large number of farmers, and as you can appreciate, very few farmers would not have dogs, and they're very much part of the farming operation. So without me saying any more, I'll hand it over to Sean. He's our policy advisor for Federated Farmers and is very much up to speed with this. So I'll hand it over to you, Sean.
Cool, thanks, Bruce. So firstly, I'm one of the policy advisors. So the way we go about this is we first engage with our executive team. They give us overall position on how we feel about the consultation or the proposals. We'll then go out and do our membership advisories and seeking some information from them. So we have over 400 members in the Waikato district, whom we would have received at least 50 plus separate emails giving us feedback on their opinions and positions on different areas of the bylaw. We don't really have too much information in respect to, I guess, all the off-leash and on-leash areas. That's generally not too much of a concern for farmers. The big point around that would just be that if there's going to be less off-leash areas in residential areas, it might become an issue where there's more rural unsealed roads and areas like that where the community may start stretching out towards with their dogs. The next section, dog restrictions. Federated Farmers does believe that our farm dogs are well trained, educated, and looked after. The big difference is our working farms have staff on farm or have owners on farm with their dogs pretty much 24/7. This allows them to control, look after, and manage their dogs a lot better than a lot of other, I guess, individuals that may have to get off to work or have other commitments during the day that leave them off the property. The next section is our farmers also have like plenty of contractors, vets, other staff and groups that come out onto their farm daily or at least weekly. This allows them to be peer reviewed and also criticised. I know farmers are quite happy to get stuck into other farmers if there's any issues around animal welfare or dog welfare, I guess, aside from cows. Another area under dog restrictions that we'd like to point out is just the fact that working dogs, unlike a lot of the previous submitters thoughts maybe, is they're not just farm dogs. The working dog class under that includes police dogs, dogs working for the ministry, biosecurity dogs, service dogs, as well as farm working dogs. So I would deem it not sensible to, I guess, exclude all those dogs as well. So getting down to it, as part of the dog restrictions or the dog permit section, we do support the 2-dog permit requirements for the bylaw. It's probably the best way that we feel that council can implement to manage dogs in the rural area better, and we understand that as an efficient and effective way without impacting farm working dogs. We are, however, open to any other alternatives if council or any of the staff have any following the submission process. The only thing around that we'd like to consider is just the fact that retired farm working dogs, as opposed to a current working dog, they still need to be included in that permit or in that permit exemption. I think the previous submitter speaking around hunting dogs was on a similar mindset with his issues. So yeah, as far as the permit side, yeah, we do just want to reiterate that we are happy for this permit requirement, so long as working dogs are exempt, including those retired dogs. And we also support that largely due to the fact that council suggests that there's going to be an 18-month buy-in period, and that just gives, I guess, people a more willingness to invest themselves in this permit decision, because it would be quite an easy thing for someone in the rural area, not particularly farmers. They're quite willing to comply, but if someone isn't already registering or someone doesn't want to apply for the permit, I think it might take council realistically quite a while to find them. So yeah, having a good 18-month buy-in period with a waived fee is a good option. Yeah, and as you can see in my appendixes, I just briefly looked at a lot of the district councils in the North Island. I was trying to just look at what other councils have done. There's not too much as far as restrictions on rural areas that I've been able to find. There's some that have area setbacks, and there's a few that have restrictions. I see Wi-Fi's got one for 5 dogs, and there was another couple I was referred to in the South Island that have restrictions on 2 or 3 dogs as well. But yeah, so that's about it for me. I'm quite happy to answer any questions. So yeah, fire away.
Thank you. I just muted myself because of fire sirens. We do have questions for you. The first one being Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for your submission, Sean and Bruce. Look, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the proposal not exempting hunting dogs, in light of the fact that some farmers actually have issues with pigs as predators on their farms, and there possibly could be a need for those hunting dogs. I'm just interested, you touched on hunting, but you haven't mentioned it in your submission. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, one of the issues I was considering around that is the level of measuring compliance. Even if you look at it from that working dog classification, where Bruce and I were discussing it beforehand, you may have the ability to look at like a hunter weight or a specific bred dog, but there are examples where breeding's changing, and also farmers for whatever reason, may have different breeds doing different things. For my farm example, we use what is he? He's a beardy cross Labrador, and he brings in the cows for us. So he's not probably particularly bred for what he does, but he does his job very well. And that's just, I guess, the same hunting dogs is how you're going to actually measure compliance and measure whether they need a permit or not. It may just be too hard a basket, and a permit's not too big of an issue if it's a 18-month buy-in period to get it free.
I don't, this hunting dog one, because I know farms out further from where I am, they have, as you mentioned, the councillor here, the necessity of dogs for keeping pigs and that at bay. So yeah, I don't have an issue with dogs in that category. It can be pretty difficult to define, as Sean has mentioned, what a farm working dog is, and it could be maybe quite difficult to define a pig hunting dog, which may get taken out on the farm to do other work as well. So it's a huge grey area.
Yeah, Alan, you have a question.
Yeah, look, thanks, Sean and Bruce. Look, Councillor Eyre has actually covered off largely, but Sean, you mentioned a piece of legislation that identifies what working dogs are. Can you read that out again to me?
Yeah. Oh, I've got it open on the side link. So under the I guess the Act, it states, where's a working dog? A disability assist dog or any dog kept by police, the ministry, like a Ministry of Fisheries, Defence, or any employee under the state, are kept solely for the purposes of herding or driving stock, which is, I guess, where most farmers will comply with. And then Department of Conservation are involved, aviation security, civil defence, emergency management. And there's also one, there's declared by the resolution of the Territory Authority to be a working dog for the purpose of this Act. So I was wondering, we're wondering if hunting dogs could be classified under that potentially, if the council would like to go down that route. I don't know.
What you've read to me there doesn't include hunting dogs.
No.
So it is a piece of legislation that we could hang our hat on effectively, because for the 20 years I've been in local government, and every time I've done a dog hearing, which has been several times, this has always come up as a bone, excuse the pun here, bone of contention, and this, the definition of how they are actually treated, and it's always difficult to assess it unless you've got something to pin it back to actually be able to do that. So you've probably given us this. I'm going to ask a question of Bruce, my second and last question.
Sorry, thank you.
And the question is, I don't know whether you've been watching this morning, Bruce, but several submitters through James Carter, their legal representative, have cast a fair bit of dispersion on rural, especially farmers, in relation to dog welfare. Would you agree with those views?
I didn't hear that submission. I was out working my dogs at that time. I actually, last night, I made some further inquiries and talked to a local vet, because I only see my immediate neighbours around with their dogs, and they're all well treated, well looked after. And so I asked the vet who's going out on properties, and her comment was that overall, the dogs on the farms are very well looked after and well trained, well treated, and relatively obedient. And I say relatively because the old saying goes, one word from me and the dog does what it likes, and I think it applies to most people with dogs. So no, I would have to strongly disagree with that, because and my submission will deal a bit later. The work that farmers put into dogs and the work that they do on the farm is huge. We cannot do without them.
Mr. Cameron, I think if you expand on that in your submission, that would be helpful. We have another couple of questions for you, or for Mr. Hazelton. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. As you can see, I am from a farming background with my background. but not a member of the Feds. My question relates to a comment that was made in the submission about reverse sensitivity. And I just put it to you that if we were to include something like under nuisance, dogs being used in the management of livestock should not be deemed a nuisance. And I know in my own situation, I've got a couple of dairy farms around me, and often in the 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, I hear dogs working, bringing the dairy cows in. And further afield, I've got hills where the guys are working dogs on the sheep. So is that something that you would, from your comments, would be looking for?
So that section was, I'm just referencing that there was a section 5.2 under the track changes one I was looking at, and it says take steps as necessary to prevent dogs becoming a nuisance or annoyance by persistent barking or howling.
Yes.
So by that, I was just wanting to refer just to the fact that I guess there's persistent barking and howling, and then there's objectionable, and maybe it might need to be put in there just to clarify that. Just we don't want to risk the issue where I guess reverse sensitivity is occurring and people are moving out rural and not understanding the full picture of what they're getting into, I guess, before complaints start rolling in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maguire.
Sean and Bruce, you support the 2-dog policy for mainly lifestyle and in the community. How do you see that being handled? Do you see it? We've got in our policy that you've got to get the neighbour's consent. Do you think it should be the neighbour's consent or the dog officer who decides whether they need more allowed to have more dogs or not?
I think when it comes to getting the neighbour's consent, I think that's fraught with a lot of issues, which may be nothing to do with dogs. So I would be, yeah.
Can I just assist you there, Mr. Cameron? It's not actually in our bylaw, nor is it in our policy. It's only referred to in the sample form for the existing permits for urban and country living areas. It's not mentioned in our bylaw at all.
So that's a non-issue then.
It is a non-issue. Thank you. Yeah. Are there any more questions for our chaps? If not, thank you. Thank you in particular, Mr. Hazelton, for the way your presentation is laid out. It's really, really helpful. It's very helpful when you see question and amendment. So congratulations on that. I'm sure it's you're no beginner at that. But thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation.
Cool. Thank you very much. Have a nice.
Ms. Clark.
Yes, next speaker is submitter 3123 and 3119, Shane and Teresa Borrell on page 154 and 158.
Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Borrell. I think it's Mr. and Mrs. Borrell. We've got your submissions. We've got your submissions. We've read them. So please don't feel that you need to read them through again. Just give us the salient points and the highlights that you want us to include in our deliberations.
Certainly, thank you and good afternoon. My name is Teresa Borrell, and I am a sheep and beef farmer from Waikaretu. I also breed and train Chesapeake Bay Retrievers for the field and show, and as working gun dogs, mainly used for waterfowl and upland bird hunting, but also for deer. With my dogs, I have won 2 New Zealand Field Trial Championships and numerous show titles, and I'm the only registered breeder of Chesapeakes in New Zealand, and I have also exported dogs to Australia, USA, and Europe. All my dogs are pedigree Chesapeakes, and they're registered with Dogs New Zealand, formerly the New Zealand Kennel Club. I wish to object to the bylaw to introduce permits in rural zoned areas for properties with more than 2 non-working dogs on the following 3 grounds. Number 1, the bylaw is unnecessary. The bylaw is based on complaints over 5 years, which relate to only 7 different properties, and most of these dogs were unregistered at the time. On an annualised basis, this is 1.4 issues per year. This proposed bylaw will detrimentally affect some 913 ratepayers, all to address an issue which is virtually non-significant statistically wise at 1.4 issues per year. Number 2, it is discriminatory. This bylaw will not apply to working dogs, which are by far the most numerous dogs on rural properties in the district. Only non-working dogs, such as pet, show, hunting and breeding dogs, will be affected by the bylaw. Under this proposed bylaw, I will need a permit for my Chesapeake Bay retrievers, but I can have unlimited working dogs on my farm, unregulated by the bylaw. Number 3, the bylaw lacks consistency. In the supporting material that Council have given, they stated, we cannot express strongly enough that the purpose of this proposed change is to protect the well-being of all dogs in our district. The changes will give us the ability to act if there are issues with housing or health of dogs. Yet the proposed bylaw specifically excludes the working dogs, which are present on most of the 35,000 properties identified as rateable rural properties in the Waikato district. I'm certainly not advocating for permits for rural dog owners. I'm just pointing out the proposed bylaw lacks consistency and credibility. I wish to thank you for your time, taking the time to hear my comments. And are there any questions?
Well, thank you for your time as well. Are there any questions for Ms. Borrell? Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for your submission. I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on, obviously we have working dogs exempt, and I take on board what you're saying about that showing bias perhaps to working dogs. What would be your thoughts if there was an exclusion also for registered breeders?
I mean, that will certainly help in some areas for those that are generally breeding. The question is who would maintain that register of breeders, and on what basis would you have to prove you were a registered breeder? Is it just a member of Dogs New Zealand or the Kennel Club, or does it mean you have to go further than that? You know, I breed registered dogs. All my dogs are registered with the Kennel Club. Is that something that has to happen to prove that? Would the New Zealand Kennel Club or Dogs New Zealand be prepared to do that? Those are questions that would have to be answered in that case.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. In relation to the permits, are you for having a permit system at all? And if so, how many dogs would you consider the right sort of number?
Yes, no, I'm against having a permit for the rural properties. You know, interestingly enough, I have the working dogs and my Chesapeakes, and because I breed and show and train and I'm a registered breeder, I naturally registered all my dogs in the area, my Chesapeakes. Now I would be severely disadvantaged for having doing so. I also have 3 Chesapeakes that work my cattle and move my cattle from one paddock to another. So they're dual purpose in that regard. I also have a farm dog that thinks she's a retriever now. So, you know, these dogs do cross over. And we are in an area also where we do get pigs coming into our neck of the woods. My dogs are not pig dogs, but the neighbours certainly have dogs that come and deal with the pigs. My dogs deal with Canada geese in terms of issues on farmers' properties and the amount that they destroy of grassland, etc. You know, so I could go to my neighbours with 3 or 4 of my dogs and help clean up the goose problem, Canadian goose problem. So what I am saying is that you're not recognising all dogs, and to simply say working dogs and exclude the gun dogs and other dogs that work in rural areas, it just isn't consistent. And I don't understand why we need this particular bylaw. I think it's covered in legislation we have already.
Thank you.
You mean the element within that bylaw, because we must have a bylaw per se?
Yes, sorry. Yes, this particular change.
Right, right. Are there any more questions? It would appear not, but thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do that. We really appreciate that you do take time and give us information that goes into our deliberations. So thank you for your submission. Ms. Clark, where are we?
Next speaker is submitter 3125, Mike Moss, on page 153.
Is it all right?
We good?
Hello, Mr. Moss. We can see you, and hello, and we can hear you. Fantastic.
Good. Well, that's always progress.
It's wonderful what technology can do, isn't it?
It is.
Look, welcome. Thank you very much for your submission. We have read it. You've got some highlights in there. So just tell us what you want us to know. The next 10 minutes are yours, including any questions that may arise. So,
all right. Thank you. Look, to be honest, I'm not too fussed about the rules you've proposed. I agree largely with the last speaker that I think some of it's unnecessary, and to some degree, you may be trying to fix something that a lot of us don't think is broken. But my concern is that you're looking at bringing in new rules when the council is not enforcing the rules that it has. We've had a very bad experience, as you can gather from my submission, and Lisa, I know you're privy to it. And the rules weren't enforced, and I can go into the reasons why they weren't enforced. We had a very poor go with council as far as communication and everything that went down. We did have a meeting at one point. I don't know how much council actually knows about what went down, Lisa. Should I back up a bit on that?
Okay, so just remember what's pertinent to the bylaw is what we're here for.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm really addressing that council shouldn't be putting any more rules in until it addresses the ones it has. And if this is the only way I can get in front of council, then so be it. Here I am. But basically, my cousin who was staying with us back in early 2019 was attacked on our road, Waitituna Valley Road, with farmers, by the way, by an American pit bull owned by a local family. While she actually managed to jump a fence or get over a fence and remain out of the way of the dog, she did sustain injuries in getting over the fence. We phoned dog control, who promptly took the dog away, who said the phone call they've been waiting for because they've already had trouble with this dog. Next thing we know, the dog is returned to the owners without us being told. When we were told by the dog control people, we would be advised if that happened. Some months later, a local vet was doing his rugby training. He was attacked by the same dog, tore the back out of his pants, tore a hunk out of his thigh. Dog control came out again and took the dog. This time we were pretty much assured that the dog would be destroyed, and we would also be advised if it was returned. The dog was returned without us being advised. And then in August 2019, the guy who works with me on the farm, Dan, and I were moving stock down the road to Runoff. We've got 2 bits of land quite close by. We actually got by without being attacked. We actually didn't think the dog had been returned because we hadn't been advised. On coming back to open gates that we'd shut as a courtesy, he was attacked by the pit bull. We managed to hold it off because we're carrying alkathene sticks. And again, council came out, dog control came out and took the dog away. We made statements and worked with your lawyer and dog control people so that this thing would go to court and finally be put to rest. And to cut a very long story short, you guys had the dog for 6 or 7 months, and then we were told that the dog would be returned. We were very unhappy with the inconsistency of the information and what was going on. We requested through Councillor Thompson a meeting with council staff, which was convened. We met with Sue O'Gorman and Sarah, who I forget her second name, sorry. And we addressed at a meeting in Raglan the issues before us. And some of the issues that were on that agenda was clarification around dog regulatory processes, how other dangerous dogs had been handled, why was the dog returned after actually injuring someone. We're talking about 7 or 8 attacks in this whole picture. Why we weren't notified when the dog was returned. Council did at one point ask about the impacts on my family, but it didn't seem to carry forward into any action. Now, what they did tell us at the meeting was that the reason the dog was returned because council staff were threatened and nobody would stand up in court because of the threats from this family, which is a bad family. The main guy in there is now in Spring Hill on serious methamphetamine charges. He's got quite a track record for it. So look, at the end of the day, and one of the questions I asked, were regulations applied and are they fit for purpose? My concern is that the regulations weren't applied. One of the things that we were told at the meeting was that council had to make a decision between keeping staff safe and keeping ratepayers safe. And they chose staff. And I respect that because I've been up against these people. I know what they're like. But we still have no outcome. And one of the things I requested was a chance to speak to council in a collaborative, constructive way to look at how dog control manages a situation that escalates into threatening of human life. And trust me, I had a price on my head. I'm not sure how much, but apparently it's quite good. Ugly stuff. We couldn't build on the property we wanted, all sorts of things, big effect on the family. Follow-up emails with Sue and phone calls have not got me in front of council to discuss this issue. And as far as I'm aware, it is unresolved. So threats against council have won out over council regulations being enforced.
So, Mr. Moss, the point you're making here, I think, and I'm really sorry to hear your story, the point that you're making is you don't want more rules, you want the existing rules enforced better. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Moss at all? Mayor Allen.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Hey, look, firstly, can I say this is the first I've actually heard of this from memory. I'm pretty sure I hadn't heard of it before. I just want to apologise around the fact that you actually haven't had a great experience. And let's put it this way, I'll start asking a few questions as to how it has gone on here. Because my thoughts is that shouldn't happen. But anyway, look, but what it does highlight for me, what you've raised here is in fact people within our rural community that actually have undesirable dogs. And that's probably what drove a lot of the changes we're trying to implement through this, is you've given a prime example of what we don't want either in an urban or a rural area. And some people I know have moved into those rural areas so they can keep those sort of dogs. So yeah, I just want to say sorry on behalf of council. You've got in front of council now, and it's fair to say I'll ask a few questions as to what the heck's going on here.
Yeah. I did try to get in contact with you not long after, but I couldn't get past your gatekeepers. But look,
are they that good, Mike?
But genuinely, look, I think there's a question here. I mean, where I see this thing going is there's a level of escalation in the world we live in 2022 with the kind of thugs that are out there and the kind of families that move out to the country to do methamphetamine or cook it or whatever they do, that there's an element of escalation that is not fair for council to deal with. And I wonder if the dog law working with central government shouldn't be changed to the point, at what point do police get involved? Having said that, we need some policing that actually happens. We don't want someone who's scared to escalate it or whatever the current frame might be. But you know what I mean? I've got huge respect for Tracy, who I think's done a fantastic job. I think others in council have let her and myself down. But we can't just apologise and carry on, because I don't want this to happen to another family. I'm fairly big and ugly, and I'll go up and down the road with a shotgun, and at an age now, I don't really care if I have to use it. Most other families probably don't have that kind of attitude to life. And where's the law? Where's council? The advice from police was to drop the charges. We can't keep you safe, drop the charges. That's not the society that my dad fought for.
No, totally agree with you.
You make some very good points there, although I would err on the side of the shotgun if I were you.
Yeah, well, I've spoken to the police, I've spoken to council, I have a family. At one point, we looked at getting my wife and kids away from the valley.
Yeah, and that's your Councillor Eyre, we've just got a minute left if you have a very quick question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question. So the owner you're talking about didn't have multiple dogs, they just had the one medicine?
Correct.
So even if we did have this bylaw with restriction on numbers, potentially they're not going to be picked up anyway.
That's why I'm not really diving into the rules you're looking at. I just wanted to get in front of you and tell you what's going on out there and really hope that someone might fix it.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I've been denied the chance to get in front of council. I still would love a chance to come to a meeting and talk about it in a constructive way. Alan knows me well enough. I'm with council. I mean, we've all got this problem. And I'd love to be part of the solution.
Thanks, Mike. Just appreciated you coming forward.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And thank you also for taking the time to do this. It's really helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
Ms. Clark, do we have anybody in the waiting room? I see Mr. Cameron is next up again, but has he gone?
I believe he's still in the waiting room.
He's in the waiting room, so we could take him now if he's available.
Yep, so up next is submitter 3282, Bruce Cameron again, page 59.
Welcome back, Mr. Cameron. You're we can see you, but we can't hear you because you're on mute. All right. You're on mute, Mr. Cameron.
Got me there now?
We've got you there, and welcome back for the second time.
Yep, thank you. And look, I'll leave a bit of the introduction out. I've had that before, you know who I am. As I said in my submission, I have a long history with dogs, and with my family goes back a very, very long way with dog trials, especially down in the South Island, where I've still got my great-grandfather's medals. Now, the point came up about, you mentioned about farmers, or one of the submitters, that farmers don't necessarily look after their dogs. I remember a few years ago, there was a bit of a, it could be quite a few years back now, a bit of a hue and cry that came out of the urban sector that farmers don't look after their dogs. Now, those in the urban sector might be used to, I'll say, couch potatoes. The dogs aren't doing much exercise. Out on the farms, they are lean, mean, working machines, and you don't see a overweight marathon runner or on the go and watch the Olympics or any sporting, you don't see overweight athletes. And that's what I think a lot of people have got used to with dogs in town. They're somewhat overweight, and they compare that to what they think a working dog should look like. Now, when it comes to looking after dogs, talking to my neighbour, who works for my neighbour, he was taking his dog down to Matamata, had got kicked by a bull. There's a very good vet down there. He got kicked by a bull and broke his leg. I've had a dog that got kicked by a bull. It cost me about $7,000 to fix it up. Dogs are exceptionally important, and when you start spending that sort of money on them, you treat them, you want a return on your investment, if I can put it that way. So I also question how far council mandate goes to dog welfare, as in the dog itself. My understanding is that's not your area of mandate. It's maybe the housing of dogs and that, but not necessarily the dog itself. Other than removing dangerous dogs, which going by the previous submitter, sounds like leaves a bit to be desired. Good at removing them, but also good at bringing them back again. So yeah, as I mentioned, the vet I was talking to on farms is overall they're pretty well looked after. the farms that she goes to. So, I mean, and there's always exceptions, whatever industry, whatever profession. So, but anyway, I'll leave that to any questions, and hopefully there are some.
I hope there are some too. Do we have any questions for Mr. Cameron? Councillor Church.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bruce. We always appreciate your input and the commitment that you have to having voice in council. It's good. My question is really about, and I know you're rural focused and federated farmers in rural and have a business in there, but I'd like to be a bit more information about what parts of the bylaw do you approve of, if any, whether it's rural or urban. And now, you know, you've been a past community board chair, etc. So you've got a lot of, and you've got a business in the town. So I'd be interested in what parts you approve.
We approve of working dogs being exempt the permit requirements, and accept the up to 2 dogs without a permit, and over that, which, I mean, I'm thinking of a farm very close to me, and they'd have over 30 dogs on their property. So that exemption, I think, is good. When it comes to the town side of things, I fully respect. I haven't looked into that area to any great degree, but troublesome dogs next door can be a real nuisance, and you do need some means of dealing with them. And that's why we, as Federated Farmers and myself, have supported the 2-dog bylaw, the 2-dog without a permit, because more than that, you need some means to get onto a property to deal with these situations. But then again, against that, by far the majority of people do look after their dogs. And I think the majority of your cases deal, 158 deal with about 5 people causing the problem. So, yeah, it probably hasn't answered your question that well, Jackie, to go into in-depth. I mean, I've read through the bylaw. It seems relatively simple, but I do appreciate there's going to be some flack come up about hunting dogs, and that there's going to be an issue there. And you may
Thank you. So, Councillor Smith, you had a question.
Yeah, Bruce, you've mentioned, good afternoon, you've mentioned this number that a number of submitters have referred to, the 5 or 7, whatever it is, incidents over the last few years. As the chair of the regulatory committee, and having dealt with some of those situations when it's come to the classification of the dogs and the likes, one of the things that I think has come through in the evidence has been that people have moved to the country to carry on some of these activities, be it breeding for factory farming of dogs, for dog fighting, and some other unsavoury activities. It's very difficult to say, a sledgehammer to hit a pin, as someone said earlier. But where the country or the rural area is being used because it's got a freedom of restrictions at the moment, can you, having commented on it, can you suggest a way forward for council? Because it's all very well for people to say, not good enough, no, wrong, everything else. But I'd like to hear from people with solutions if we can going forward. So there may be not a great many, but behind most of those that have come before the committees that I've sat on they've deliberately gone to the country because there isn't the restrictions, and therefore those activities have been there and have caused the problems. So as a rural person, how can we prevent that being an open slather situation?
That's why we as Feds and myself have really supported this 2-dog issue. More than that, you've got to get a permit if they're not working dogs, because we had reservations about it, but Sean did a bit of research and talking with the council about it, and we could see your side of it, that you needed something to manage these situations. But then again, as your previous submitter had said, it's all very well having these bylaws and everything in place, but if you don't actually enact them properly, you're not going to achieve anything. So
is it fair to say, if I may, is it fair to say that it's only in times when there is an issue that we need the bylaw, and if we don't have a provision that deals with those minority situations, that we're left up the creek and we will be criticised if we don't have provisions that enable staff to deal with them efficiently?
Yeah, you need, I agree, you've got to have something in place so you can deal with these issues. And as I said, that's why we support this 2-dog one.
So, final
Thank you.
question, Councillor Eyre.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I guess the limit on 2 in rural areas may be perceived by some as being somewhat of an arbitrary number. Would you have, for argument's sake, any objections if that limit was set at 3 or 4? I mean, at what stage do we start defining that over and above a set number is too many? I'm just interested in your views about what if that proposal was a limit of 3? Would you say that you would go back to the 2 limit?
No, I agree with your take. It's an arbitrary number. And as my understanding with a bylaw, you can, with a permit, you can have more than your 2 if you get a permit. Am I correct on that one?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so that can probably be dealt with that way. Now, whether that was lifted to 3, you know, I'm pretty relaxed about that side of things. One of the things, and I don't know in this here, the definition of a rural zone, is that outside the town boundary? Because, you know, talk about 20 hectares or the rural zone, because there's it could be farmers, ex-farmers, that people actually breed working dogs and they're on smaller blocks that do it. So I don't want to see them disadvantaged, because they are of great service to the rural livestock industry for the dogs that they breed. So, you know, it's how we bring about the flexibility there to deal with that. So
I think you've made some good points there, Mr. Cameron, and as always, added information for us to, the more we try to consider, the more there is to consider. I'm afraid your time is up, but thank you very much for double appearing. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
No, thank you for the time and being able to submit. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark, do we have anybody in the waiting room?
I don't believe there's anyone in there right now.
You don't? There is no one?
No, there isn't.
Okay, so we are our next submitter is due at 2:10. So I would suggest that you take a small comfort break, adjournment.
Can I just ask a question, if I may?
Pardon?
Can I ask a question, if I may, for clarity only?
Yes.
A boarding kennel is not a breeding kennel. Is that
correct?
Under 11.1, it talks about premises which are authorised to be a boarding kennel or doggy daycare centre.
Yeah.
But we haven't included recognised breeding properties, have we? Under the no person shall keep more than 2 dogs except.
And again, please make a note of that so that we can put it in our deliberations and just be clear.
I'm assuming that what I'm saying is correct.
At the moment, yes, but it's as we've said, these are the hearings. We're listening to people. We then have our deliberations where we need to go through this with it.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair.
Wooden boarding kennel.
To have that clarity going forward through the remainder of the hearing is good. Thank you.